One more story here before we get to our guests that we wanted to make sure to highlight, because it just really is so illustrative of the twisted relationship this country has to Israel and the way the logic of it permeates every administration, whether it is Democrat or Republican. Let's put this up on the screen. This was a scoop from Reuters, and Huffington Post fleshed out some of this reporting as well. So they say, scoop, the U.S. gathered intelligence last year, this was during the Biden administration, that Israel's military lawyers warned there was evidence that could support war crimes charges against Israel for its military campaign in Gaza. That's according to 5 former U.S. officials. They say the previously unreported intelligence described by the former officials as among the most startling shared with top U.S. policymakers during the war pointed to doubts within the Israeli military about the legality of its own tactics that contrasted sharply with Israel's public stance. 2 of the former U.S. officials said the material was not broadly circulated until late in the Biden administration, when it was disseminated more widely ahead of a congressional briefing in December 2024. Even before then, lawyers at the State Department had repeatedly raised concerns with U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken that Israel might be committing war crimes, according to 5 former U.S. officials. As early as December 2023, lawyers from the State Department's legal bureau told Blinken in meetings they believed Israel's military conduct in Gaza likely amounted to violations of international humanitarian law and potentially war crimes. There's so much in here that is important. And I know none of this will be surprising to you guys, but again, I think it's important to dig into exactly how this all unfolded. So there were 3 different things going on. First of all, there was a State Department assessment that had been reported on previously, and at least one State Department official resigned over the watering down of this assessment and the fact that once it went through the leadership, they changed the conclusions, they watered it down. Why? Because the minute that you say Israel is committing war crimes, it means by our own law, we are not allowed to send them weapons. It also opens up the possibility of war crimes charges against our own officials, because if you are complicit and you know that their intent is criminal, then you yourself, if you are aiding and abetting that, then you open yourself up to charge. So you had that report internally that was basically like watered down and quashed. You had a refusal to actually engage in any sort of an in-depth assessment. So everyone's just sort of like covering their eyes and ears and pretending like they didn't know what was going on here. So if they can avoid making an assessment, then they can pretend, play dumb, and we think they're the most moral army in the universe. They told us that there was Hamas under that school bus or under that church or under that mosque or under that hospital or whatever. And then you have this, which is Israel's own lawyers and military saying, we think we're committing war crimes. And the way they got out of this one is by saying, well, we didn't come to our own independent assessment. So the fact that the Israelis think they're committing war crimes and that it spoke specifically to intent, which is also the key way that they always dodge. Oh, accidents happen, war is hell, blah, blah, blah. But they don't intend to murder all of these babies and women and innocents. So since it spoke to intent, that's what created a further difficulty for them. And so their dodge there, which was led by Brett McGurk, was the most aggressive advocate for Israel in the administration, saying we can't do nothing, we were not going to change course, we're not going to bring any of this to light whatsoever. In any case, the reason their argument there was basically like, oh, well, we didn't come to our own assessment, so the Israelis, they think that, but we haven't come to our own assessment, so we're just going to say and do nothing. I mean, it's just so incredibly disgusting. And then the Trump administration was briefed on all of this coming in. Mm-hmm. And of course, here's the difference between the two. In the Biden administration, there was some hand-wringing about it, and they did nothing. In the Trump administration, there was no hand-wringing about it, and they just continued to fully fund and support the genocide.
Yeah, I mean, but this is why the Biden one, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I appreciate a little bit more honesty, because for them, they were always hemming and hawing. The fact is, December 2023 on, they got a briefing and they said, hey, this is probably happening, and they decided to just cover it up as Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. And by the way, again, at the very same time, they were justifying U.S. support for Ukraine because they said that Russia was violating international norms and Putin is a war criminal who had to step down, and Russia was committing a genocide in Ukraine at the very same time of what was happening in Israel. There was no consistency between the two. This is why the whole human rights thing is a farce. It always has been. And instead, they took it like to the max conclusion, I think, with the way that they conducted themselves, like broadly. And so, I don't know. For the Biden administration in particular, really what I think I'm shocked by is the same what happened with Cheney, where in all of his New York Times obituaries and everything, even the political reporters and others, they would say, oh, he was a patriot. He died a patriot because he stood up to Trump. Like, that's the only lens that they look at politics. Even right now, Jake Sullivan is launching a new podcast with Vox Media. Like, how can you, if you're Vox, right? Like, and Harvard also, the Harvard Kennedy School.
I think Brett McGurk, who is a genuine demon.
Yeah, he's on CNN.
I think he's on CNN, and I think he also got hired by Harvard.
That's what I'm saying. Like, these people, they suffer no consequences. Like, the entire political elite is like, oh, you work for Biden? Good guy, check mark, right? They never look at you. They don't analyze your actual actions and the consequences of what they mean, as long as you are opposed to the right side or if you speak in the right language. And that's basically what all like current Democratic neo-lib politics is centered around. I just think it's so crazy that a guy like Sullivan and them can not only get the HKS deal, but like launch a podcast with no shame, nothing. It's like acting like a victor. Like, sorry, dude, you actually presided over one of the worst foreign policy periods in American history. Period. End of story. Like, there's no question about it.
Put E2 up on the screen because this is also very telling. I would recommend you read this whole Huffington Post piece because it gets into some of the details about it talks about the Brett McGurk piece more deeply. But here's what they said. They say Biden officials worried that attaching their names to a recommendation to limit American support for Tel Aviv would hinder their future career prospects, the former senior official said, which is in itself appalling. Yes, it is. It is appalling. And to Saagar's point, think about this, okay? Actually, like, cutting off support for Israel's genocide, that would hurt their career prospects. But the fact that they were complicit in that and engaged in a multi-year cover-up, that has no problem for their career prospects. You know, they're getting podcasts, they're going to Harvard School, other Ivy League institutions, corporate boards, whatever. World is their oyster. No problem there. And so that is the sort of logic that pervades government. Now, I think on the Democratic side, there is a shifting, for the politicians, there is a shifting political calculus that they are grappling with now. And you see it in primaries that are playing out across the country. Obviously, you saw it in the New York City mayoral race. You see it in terms of, you know, the members of Congress now who are having to look over their shoulder and worry about, what did I do? What did I say? Where am I going to locate myself now? And are wildly at odds with the Democratic base on the issue of Israel specifically. So there is some changing political calculus that is happening right now as we speak. But up until this very moment, all of the costs and the consequences were on doing the right thing. We're on asserting an independent foreign policy. We're on checking the abuses of Israel, calling out their war crime. You know, Tony Blinken was running around the State Department talking about how this was ethnic cleansing. Like, they knew. They knew. Of course they knew. I mean, again, this is not going to be a surprise to you. But they played dumb, and they covered for them, and they did it the whole time, right up until the end. There was a final debate about, okay, we've got this intelligence from Israel. Should we, on our way out the door, do something that would be, you know, basically a virtue signaling, because we know the Trump administration is going to come in and they're going to completely reverse course on whatever we do, but at least it would send a signal that, you know, this is unacceptable and kind of lay a marker down, the way that Obama did when he let that settlement vote get through in the UN Security Council. Like, this is something, and Biden did it on some other things. He took Cuba off the, like, state-sponsored terror list or something like that, to sort of, like, again, it's like a signal of the direction they think foreign policy should go in. And they said, no, even that, because we're worried about, you know, is the Harvard School going to hire us then? Is, you know, am I going to get my podcast? Am I going to be able to go to SKDK as the chubby Indian guy ultimately?
Who does not look like me, to be very, who does not look like me. He doesn't. He's just fat and wears it's not fair. It's not fair. Okay? I think it's the I actually think it's the glasses. That's what I think.
Anyway.
Yeah, he still has a job, so yeah. Exactly. These guys,
Their
I don't know.
calculus, I mean, their calculus was correct. And
No, of course it was correct, because look
It's
at
disgusting.
Cheney and all of the Iraq war people. They're all doing
Yeah.
the exact same thing. Like, it's like, I'm serious. I watch these people walk around town. Even today, take a stroll down K Street. You'll see Paul Wolfowitz. You'll see all these guys. They have no shame. They live completely normal life. Nothing happened to them. It's sick.
Yeah.
And now the next generation, it's the same thing. And it happens over and over and over and over again. They'll be on CSIS panels till the day they die. And it's
I
like,
mean,
why does nobody pay a price for being bad in this country?
That's one of the things I appreciate about what Ro Khanna said about Chuck Schumer today.
Oh, right. the
He's like,
Iraq
not
war.
only did he help march us into Iraq war, but he gave Netanyahu a blank check. Like, it's not an accident that those two things are connected to, by the way.
Yeah.
The people who tend to be for endless war are always for endless war. Like, they're always, and this will set us up well for the next block, talking about the $1 trillion war machine. But in any case, I am somewhat hopeful that the logic, the just cynical political calculus, when you see someone like Seth Moulton coming out and being like, I'm not going to take AIPAC dollars, after he went to AIPAC and found out they weren't going to give him any money, by the way. But he sees the cynical political calculus now, if I'm going to win a Democratic primary, is to say no AIPAC money. That is an absolute sea change. So we'll see how that translates into future American foreign policy, how it translates into future position for the Democratic Party. But this is, you know, the cover up here, just disgraceful. No one who was involved in this should ever be forgiven.
That's right. All right, we got our guest standing by, talk about a new book, $1 Trillion War Machine. Let's get to it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.